Hi, I'm Dylan McElhatton with Halogen Systems, and today I'm going to show you how to configure our display and sensor to match whatever your PLC or SCADA system is expecting. So we're going to focus mostly on 4 to 20 0 and range settings today, as well as getting what measurements we want onto our display LCD. This video is going to follow basically our initial commissioning, so I'm not going to touch on sensor function too much in this video. So our display by default is going to be showing chlorine, pH, ORP, PSU, and temperature. Our default temperature is in degrees Celsius. PSU is practical salinity units. Chlorine, of course, is in ppm. And then our pH are whole pH units. Now, if you want more or less parameters displayed here, we're going to go into Menu, Configuration, and we're going to go to Display Options primarily. We have two different places to adjust kind of what we're seeing on the LCD. The first thing is Measurement Options. This is going to actually affect what the sensor is doing, not what this display is showing. So if we want to just change what is shown on our display screen, we're going to go to Display Options, and we're going to go through here. These are all of our parameters, and we can select which ones we want to see. Unfortunately, we have limited space on this screen, so you can only show connectivity or PSU. You cannot show both. The X next to these lines is showing that that measurement is enabled to display on the screen. The display has about a 15-second timeout, so if it times out, go ahead and hit Menu again and go back to Configuration and Display Options. So if we want to turn off Display PSU, we're going to go over to it, hit Select. We're going to use the up and down arrows to put a dash next to it, and we're going to hit Select again, and that's going to save that new setting. And then we're going to come up here, we're going to hit Display Connectivity, hit Select, put an X next to that using the up and down arrows, and hit Select, and that'll save the new setting. We also have a couple other things we can do over here. We can change chlorine to be displayed to 3 decimal places instead of 2. We can do display from degrees Celsius to degrees Fahrenheit. And we can also enable our backlight timer. With this enabled, the backlight's going to stay on all the time. With it disabled, it's going to turn off the backlight after 30 seconds of inactive button time. We are now displaying conductivity here. And I'll go ahead and show a couple other things that we can do. So if we don't have, say, a pH sensor in here, and we don't need to see pH, then we're going to go ahead and go to Display Options, and we're going to disable pH. So we're no longer going to be seeing pH. Hit Select, and then if we go back, now notice how the pH is missing. And to get it back, same thing, come here to Configuration, Display Options, and Display pH. And now we have it back. This is all good things to do in that first time that you power up the sensor during your initial function test or with the sensor in the system and doing your initial configuration. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to configure our 4 to 20 milliamp options. So this is common for PLC communication. We have 4 outputs on our display. In this particular model, it all goes through the M12 connector. In our CN01 or in our D01 and D04, there will just be knockouts here, and you can hardwire in conduit or install strain relief and wire into our board directly. So to configure our 4 to 20 outputs, we're going to go to Configuration, 4 to 20 milliamp options, and we're going to set 4 to 20 milliamp span. By default, our chlorine span is 10 ppm. Our PSU span is 50 units. Our temperature 4 to 20 span in Celsius is 50 degrees Celsius. And our pH span is 7. Our ORP span is 200. And the conductivity span is 65,000. These can all be adjusted. If you are expecting a chlorine span on your PLC of 20 units, you're going to want to go to chlorine, and we're going to change this value to 20 to hit Select, and that's going to increase the range or the span of our 4 to 20 scaling. Now we're going to go back, and we're going to set our 0 This is the 4 to 20, 0. This is the minimum value that the 4 to 20 system is expecting. So at 4 milliamps, our temperature output is going to be 0 on the SCADA. So if our sensor is measuring 0, your PLC should be getting 4 milliamps from our controller here. The 4 to 20 pH 0 is 5, and you add that to your range or your span, and that's going to give us a range of 5 to 12 pH. If you want the full span of 0 to 14, we're going to change this to 0, and we're going to change the span on pH to 14. And now we will be able to measure pH across the range of 0 to 14 for 4 to 20. And select to save. And you can do this for all of our other measurements as well. By default, output 1 is chlorine, output 2 is PSU, output 3 is temperature, and output 4 is pH. Output 2 is user configurable. So we can go to this portion here, select out to type, and we can change what unit we're going to be outputting from output 2. By default, we are outputting PSU. If you select any one of these other measurement parameters, that will now be the output on output 2. Temperature and pH, of course, already have designated outputs on 3 and 4. But if you only want to use output 1 and output 2, you can configure output 2 to output any of these parameters but chlorine. And that is the basic setup for our display to communicate with your 4 to 20 analog communication over PLC. Thanks for listening, and email us at tech@halogensys.com if you have any questions.